course, I wholeheartedly agree. We should not be using AI to write the docs.
Hello, system thinkers. Welcome to The Question, a live, collaborative learning show committed to broadening your perspective on design systems. I'm your host, Ben Callahan, founder of Sparkbox and Redwood's design system community. And you're listening to the episode 079 Deep Dive with Afyia Smith, where we're discussing the evolution of design system documentation. If you have a moment, please get subscribed to the show out at bencallahan.com/thequestion. Let's get into it. Afyia, tell us a little bit about your background. I want to hear, because you're such a specialist in the space, and I don't know. And it's funny because when we're going to look at the data here in a minute, and one of the questions we asked is who owns design system docs? And almost nobody has somebody who's fully dedicated to this role. So this is unique. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into this deep specialization.
Yeah. I've been in the design system space for maybe 7 years now, and I started out as a UX UI designer over at EA, Electronic Arts. I was part of a really small design system team. We wore many hats, one of those being writing docs while building out the library. And I really fell in love with writing the docs. It gave me, because I was such a new designer, it was a way to understand components. And I also got a seat at the table with the engineering team because they had implementation details that needed to be kind of added. And I just really, really enjoyed that process and quickly kind of dropped designing. It wasn't my passion, and moved full speed ahead into writing documentation. Shortly after I left EA, I started to freelance with a few of the design system agencies that are out there, mostly on design systems, but specifically on documentation for design system teams of various sizes and design systems of various phases and stages. So I'd be brought in to maybe help give a documentation workshop. So that's helping and teaching them how to write. Or they don't want anything to do with it. They just shove 50 components at me, leave me alone for 3 months, and I'm spinning up documentation. Also helping with tool platform analysis, what's better for our team, custom site, zero height, Notion, things of that sort. Then governance came into play in contribution models. And as of late, AI readiness, which is what I was doing most recently at Epic Games. I was there for about 5 years, and I managed to be a documentation specialist on the design system team, which is a really rare position. I don't know anyone else that's been able to do that. And I did that for the entire length of time that I was there. And I did it for 2 of their design systems, Fortnite and Epic Design System. I helped build out the custom reference site. I learned Docs as Code workflow because that's how we were maintaining the documentation, writing it and publishing it and reviewing it. I built governance models, and then I built an AI readiness framework at the point that the team started to experiment with AI tools. From there, I started just playing around with component schemas because I thought that is something that we need, a standard. How should we document these sets of components? And then I bumped into, or I think, Ben, you introduced me to PJ Onori, and I saw what he was doing with DSDS, and I raised my hand and I emailed him, and I know he thought I was crazy because it was like 3 a.m. and I was high on coffee. So it was like 10-paragraph email asking how I can contribute because, he wanted GitHub and, that's just not my area of expertise. So I just emailed him, and we've been emailing each other back and forth over the past couple of months or so. And I was able to collaborate on Doc Origin and just a lot of other really fun things with him. And so that's been my journey through documentation. It is a passion. It's what I want to do and continue to do. I want to grow it. I think now that AI is in play, there should be much more importance played on documentation. I think it's far more, it has always been foundational. It just hasn't been giving the rightful attention that it needs. And now's the time.
Yeah. Afyia, one of the things that really stands out about this role is you said this, when you were describing it at the beginning, you were like, of course, you came from design, so you had probably had a strong relationship or a natural affiliation with the designers, but it also gave you the opportunity to interact really closely with engineering.
Yeah.
And I could see that role as being almost like a bridge between these roles,
Yeah.
occasionally, because you have to sort of bring the things that are needed for both. So that's really cool. I hadn't thought of it quite like that, but that's awesome. You also mentioned PJ and some of the work that he's gotten started. There is a new design system documentation community group over on the W3C. So I dropped a link in the resource bar. You'll see that if you look at my shared screen. And if you're interested in that, you can join that group. Of course, we want to get folks who care about design systems into that space. So jump in if that's a thing you're interested in doing. It's a slow process, of course, as you probably know if you've fought along with other standards as they get formed, but it's pretty cool to see that happening. What else? I was going to ask you something else, but let's jump in. Oh, no, I wanted to say this. I know Afyia well enough now to know that she would love to connect with you. So if you're not
Yeah.
connected on LinkedIn, please check out her website, check out her LinkedIn. Those links are both right here down in the bio section. And I'm the same way. You can reach out to me over here. Please stay connected. It's really important to me. This is like my favorite part of my day is when I get introduced to new people who are systems thinkers or out in the space doing interesting stuff. That's what I want to do. And so please take a minute to get connected out there. We sent this week an extra question. I think we had 5 questions this week, which is a little bit more than we normally send, but we just had we were just very curious. So let's just level set again, and I'll remind you kind of what we asked you. The first question was, who owns design system docs for your org? And you had to choose from one of several options. The second one, who owns product building agentic workflows for your org? And you'll see that there were several options for that as well. The third, how would you describe the success of product building agentic workflows at your org? So not only who owns those things, but how successful do you feel they are? And then we gave you kind of a few options to choose from. And then the last two, in the last 12 months, what have you changed about your documentation? And you could choose all that applied in that scenario. And then the final one, what does the future of design system docs look like for you or your organization? And that was just open text, so you could just tell us kind of what you were thinking. And so lots of questions this week. We sent this out to over 1,100 design system practitioners. We got 61 responses. As always, you can click this link to see the raw data yourself and do your own analysis. And then just a reminder, none of the data that we collect is statistically significant. We've got a very small subset of very opinionated folks who join us here. So we're really just trying to collect, I think of it as like kindling for conversation is kind of what we're trying to gather here. So we can't draw super strong conclusions from this, but it helps us facilitate a conversation like this. The first question was really interesting, Afyia. I don't know if what your expectation was given your background, but like we were asking about who owns this. What did you think we would see in this data?
Yeah, well, I went in expecting no clear owner. That was just like my thesis, right? It's in the teams that I've worked with, it's hardly ever someone that owns this, owns documentation. So happily surprised to see it's close for, between everyone contributes, no clear owner, and design system lead or manager and other.
Yeah.
For the design system lead or manager, I wonder if that's by default or design.
Yeah.
Right? I wonder if that's just absorbed into, the things that I already do, or if I'm actually just the focus owner for this thing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I'm guessing people know it needs to be done, and who else is going to do it? Probably
Right.
the lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about this beforehand too, Afyia, as folks were getting signed in, that I'm always like, oh, I want to try to ask better questions when I see this many others, people choosing other. And so I dug in and kind of broke down the responses to other. And 60% of those kind of fall into a category that I would say it's everyone contributes, but we actually have real accountability. Like that's kind of by design, And so that one might serve as like a counter to everyone contributes with no clear ownership. Instead, it's saying, no, the system team owns the docs, but we don't have an individual. It's our whole team. And that's what we have done intentionally. So that's kind of a cool answer.
Yeah.
And then 30% of those answers were something around like, ownership being split. In other words, it's not a single person, but it's more like somebody owns the design side of docs, somebody owns the engineering side of docs, maybe somebody owns the process. So that was, I thought, I've actually seen that a number of times inside of system teams. So that, of course, we should have just thought to put that one in as an option. So
Yeah.
yeah. The next one was, the ownership around the agentic workflows, and so this one was a little bit more evenly distributed. But the overarching winner here with almost 50% was everybody's just kind of figuring this out on their own. That is kind of what I was thinking. Did you have thoughts on this, or were you hoping to see more about like system folks owning this, or what was your thinking?
No, I went in, if I'm thinking for question one that there might not be any clear owner, then the correlation for me would be that everyone is figuring it out on the agentic workflow side. Because I think the person that, if there is a focus in owner for documentation, then that person would probably be the one building out the agentic workflows. I thought that there should be a correlation with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I was hoping for that too, Afyia. I tried to look at that and actually dove into the data on that in a couple different ways, and there is absolutely no correlation.
Yeah. Wow.
So it just did not show up in the data. So who knows if I don't suspect that will hold. Like I do think there is a strong. I think it, like you just said, having somebody who really understands that sort of system as context for AI, also carry that out in terms of the AI workflows makes a ton of sense, right? So perhaps it's a partnership with folks across different disciplines who need those workflows in their specific tooling. But there's got to be at some point in the future that will, I think, be relevant. We don't have to spend a ton of time diving into the rest of the details here, but I want to get the conversation opened up. So this is the point in the conversation where if you have a thread, show us a check mark. If you want to jump in and share just kind of a continuation of something that's being said, raise your hand in Zoom and we'll get you into the conversation. While we're waiting for folks to volunteer, this was kind of an interesting thing I was looking at, which was comparing the success of agentic workflows with the idea of ownership of those workflows. And so I kind of just have a plot here that shows the answers on the left versus the top. So on the left side, we're looking at who owns the workflow, the agentic workflows. And then across the top, the way that they purport success. And so you can kind of see a little bit of a thread here going top left to bottom right. But what was interesting to me was how high this 14 was, which is the no way to know. So when folks are figuring it out on their own, we don't have visibility is kind of how I read this. I redrew that over here another way, which was trying to indicate ownership maybe indicates more about visibility than it does about success itself, right? So interesting to kind of see that sort of thing showing up in the data. Robin, what's up, dude?
Yeah, actually, I have a question about what I would like to hear, Afyia, your take on this, because I've seen that there are many people now working on how to encode like specifications for components, so like in a structured way, and I believe there's going to be like maybe a standard at some point where there is like a way, like the same way the DTCG emerged, like a way to specify structured specifications for component. But what I wonder is, because right now I've seen many people putting the do's and don'ts inside these specifications with like a sentence that says, in this case, like, do this or don't do that for components. And it's usually like a sentence, something very simple. But I wonder how, if you have seen examples or maybe you thought already about like how to encode like more complex do's and don'ts and runtime patterns when it comes to maybe compositions and page templates, or something that it encompasses more components. It's not a rule about one component, but it's about an organism or a page template, or it's like company wide, or it's a flow. Like I wonder how people are going to approach that, and if someone already thought through that.
I've been thinking about it, but I haven't. That's something that I'm actually working with PJ on to put that into the spec, because we've managed to create guidelines for individual components, but for things like patterns, templates, recipes, do's and don'ts might be more complicated. It's just something that I need to work through and test on how that comes out on the other side. So nothing formal right now that I can share, but thank you for bringing it up because it's something that I can add to the growing list of things I want to add to that DSDS spec.
Yeah, there's this just came up recently over on LinkedIn. I'll grab a link to Nathan's post where he kind of mentioned some of these ideas, and then I asked him specifically this question, Robin. So I'll grab that too and drop it in.
It's interesting to see all the different like schemas that are being spun up, and I need to spend some time on Nathan's as well because I think he's got some good stuff going.
Yeah, for sure. Jump in, Greg.
So one of the observations I've made in my work around sort of like this do's and don'ts and being more opinionated about like use cases and trying to figure out when to use a specific component. There's just a couple things here. Like one, I think everyone's starting to become more versed in semantics and accessibility and roles of specific components is going to be important. And then that idea probably needs to sort of start to extend into like patterns as well. But trying to pick between which thing to use, and then also inside of that, different flavors of that thing are, that's why it's so complicated, because it's not just when you look at do's and don'ts, we think of them kind of flat, but then there's complexity in it, and that's why it's so hard and so confusing. And that's something that I've been working through in my work is first hey, pick this component to do this thing. And then second, once you've picked it, what are the sort of different variety of use cases that are known that we can document? And then obviously over time, we're going to have to add more as we kind of discover more, because that's where the low visibility might happen. Especially in a really large org like the one I work in, where the system supports an unknown number of different products. There's certainly a short list of the topmost, but there's a lot. So, people have invented all sorts of different ways that they're using things, which, I kind of look at as, well, those are not unsupported or don't do it that way. Those are just unknowns that we need to get surfaced and then actually like kind of figure out what to do with them.
That whole idea of more sort of larger scale compositional guidelines is going to be huge for any organization that's trying to do more sort of, ephemeral UI stuff where it's like building UI on the fly, for users in specific use cases, right? Because I don't know how else we could test any of this stuff. Like, that's the thing I keep getting to is like, when you allow these models to build anything, like, how do you validate what they're building is actually good? It's going to be interesting. But Doug, what are you thinking?
Just back to Robin's question, how we've handled it. Our design system is deployed as I think we're up to like 13 packages. And so there'll be like the UI kit, which is the core components, form components, and so forth. And so we have a distributed skill that devs can install that includes like kind of embeds some of this knowledge. And the way we handled the cross-cutting things or the things that didn't necessarily fit in one spot, in each of those libraries, we included a recipes, which would include some common combinations of the components, which would instruct it. And then we had, in the inverse, we have a gotchas file, which is basically like things that often go wrong or things to not do. And so there's not a ton of don't. There is some level of don't do this, but it's more of a like, use this instead, or look out for this, that you didn't generate code that looks like this. And so the positives are reflected in the recipes, which might answer the question of how the AI could assemble components together, and the negatives handled by a gotchas kind of grouped by topic.
Nice. That's cool. Okay. What else, folks? Afyia, where do you want to take this conversation? There's a 1,000 places we could go here.
I saw in the comments really briefly, Kelby mentioned decision trees. I thought that's very interesting. More and more, the agentic workflows are turning into like decision trees, when to do this, if not, or something else. So that's pretty interesting.
That feels kind of deterministic though, right? Like, we wouldn't even need a model to do that. Maybe a model could help us build that tree or something, but once it's created, then it's easy to follow, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kelby, you got anything else to add on that?
I was going to add that, yes, once it's created, it's easy to follow. So I've actually changed the way that I'm really working as a designer in the design system space, where I'm starting with documentation to teach the agents what we need, what's correct, what's incorrect, and then following that up with other types of like use cases or maybe edge cases, as well as any kind of actual UI updates, and doing the UI updates afterward, because there's less of a churn that way, because the agents can do it correctly regardless of what the UI actually looks like. So it can follow it, essentially, like it can follow the recipes, even though the ingredients might change.
Yeah. Okay. It feels like there would be at some point some sort of like, that's like a cyclical thing, like a chicken or an egg thing too. At some point, like if you change the ingredients too much, the recipe no longer works, essentially, right?
Right. Yeah. That's why, well, with everything else, it's iterative. It's constant living document.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for that example. Lance, what's up?
Hey. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot too. We're definitely exploring ways to help make the agents more successful, but something I'm thinking about is I think with some success, having agents being able to build design system components, I think like we need designers to have a better awareness of what the components do. And I think that the traditional doc site structure is kind of a little intimidating when it's page by page or tab by tab. So I'm thinking like design system adoption is probably going to go up and expertise is probably going to be required to go up for all designers. And how do we meet that so they have a better understanding of the components that are available? And I think it needs to be more visual. Like I think of Mobbin and Pinterest where you can see lots of things at once. So a different way to like catch agents from building the wrong thing or people from building the wrong thing in code is maybe teaching them what exists in a different way.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think it's interesting because models are largely trained now on like everything that's publicly available to them, which is a massive internet of a lot of terrible experiences. Like in a sense, like most of the web's not accessible. Most of the web, there are like dark patterns encoded in a lot of this stuff, right? So that stuff kind of comes out in the way these models sometimes create too. So being more intentional and like a more curated set of things like you're describing, the Mobbins or what Pinterest or whatever, maybe as a way to counteract some of that. What else, folks? Afyia, I'd love to get your take on this. We asked folks in the last of the quantitative questions. So that question was, in the last year, what have you changed? What have you actually changed about your docs? We gave them a handful of options to choose from. Restructured our content into a schema, added machine readable formats. And actually, Kevin, can I put you on the spot for this really quick? Because you had a really good comment around this option. Would you just share this?
Sure, yeah. So there's a little bit of a difference nowadays, ever used to be, between machine readable and machine parsable. So an LLM can quite easily read YAML, JSON, or prose. So it'd be interesting to get a distinction between that. And what are the benefits now if an LLM is going to be reading this content and using a syntax like JSON that, has a lot of features in it that are designed for machine parsable language in contrast to machine readable.
Yeah. When we were talking about this earlier, like I was just trying to think like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we taking, large language models, which have been trained largely on the way that we talk, language, human language, and and recreating our docs in what we're calling machine readable, but just like much more clear is what we're doing. Really, we're clarifying for the model, right? We're saying like there's a pair of like, attribute value kind of things, right? And so we might have YAML or JSON or whatever that's like, it's very clear what we mean when we say these things. There's a definitive connection. But why are we doing that? And I think probably efficiency of token usage, right? Long term, right? Where if we're relying on these models to sort of parse all the English into something that's easy for them to use repeatedly, then that's going to cost more tokens to do as opposed to giving them a much clearer articulated set of instructions. So I don't know if that's it or not, but you're right. There's a big difference, right, between these. So 12 months. What have you done? Restructured, added these formats, written context files or agent instructions, made language more explicit or ambiguous, nothing. And so I kind of grouped those a little bit into saying like some of them are like sort of on how we deliver it, right? Like the context files and agent instructions or making the format a little bit more readable versus foundational things like schema or actually changing the content, So I don't know if you agree with that split in that list, Afyia, or if you've, what this shows is that people are making more changes to these sort of like surface level things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the joke of like, well, we're serving bad content in more accessible ways to our models.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this or?
Yeah, that's kind of what I mentioned. These top three look like we're doing real work, but are we if the content isn't as explicit as it needs to be? If it's just bad content that now we're going to serve up to the masses through the tools.
Yeah.
So, I say the focus should really be first and foremost on the content.
Yeah.
And then, however we surface it, but we'll have confidence that the content is in good condition.
Yeah. That's a good call. I missed somebody. I know I saw a hand go up and I missed it because we were in the middle of something. So yeah, jump in, Steven.
Yeah, it was me. I think you kind of answered what I originally was gonna say, but this is like what you're talking about now is exactly where we're at in our documentation journey, where we've kind of, we started out writing everything in Storybook and Figma and having all this stuff. And then, as AI started to progress, we kind of converted everything into Markdown in our doc site. And now we've hit a point where we're like, well, we're starting to look at JSON and YAML and creating more specific specs, just because what we've found is a lot of the time the agent is just looking for an answer. And, documentation can also be a negative when you have too much, and it can dilute what the agent is looking for. And ultimately it might go down the wrong path. Yeah. So, we found that the JSON and YAML is more effective at allowing the agent to just really hone in on exactly what it's looking for. And therefore getting our intention to the agent in a more effective way. So I think this is, we don't want to have to keep rewriting everything, right? I think laying the proper foundation and then figuring out how to distribute it out into, we can present that data in many different ways if we really need to.
Yeah, that's great. Jump in, Lance.
Hey, yeah, we are also trying not to put too many values into MD files. We're taking a slightly different approach. We already had a doc site. So we just made an MCP for agents to be able to reference the doc site, which has our tokens and stuff. And then we do have like an agent's UI MD file, but it basically just tells it to build with our real components. It doesn't contain any of the actual values. So far, that's been pretty successful. It seems to be able to do it. It will grab for the docsite MCP when it's like missing something or if there's a question. Sometimes that's costly if you're trying to read too much of it, but it's been pretty good so far.
Nice. Robin?
I have another question where I would like to hear opinions. It's about like markdowns and JSON/YAML files, because like one is prose, one is structured. Yeah. And when I heard everybody else talking, I thought that I can see maybe that there is value of still having both, because and even to actually craft both, because the prose one is very human readable, right? Like as a human eye, it's hard. I mean, I guess developers probably a different beast, like they might prefer a JSON to Markdown. But like to explain why was something structured that way, like prose still might be valuable. So I was wondering if it's something you see also in the future too, that we will both have a Markdown file and YAML file, meaning structured data of decisions, but also the prose that maybe that is then showed also on a nice website that for people to just go and read nicely instead of parsing through a JSON. But also doing that exercise of taking prose and actually structure it, like taking what you wrote in paragraphs and really converting it into structure. That also is a nice exercise, I guess. It helps you distill decisions. Like, do you see having both of those things still, or completely replace prose with YAML, like in most utopic case?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a great one. Lots of thoughts here. Stephen, do you have a response to Robin?
Yeah, just a really quick one. I definitely like agree with everything Robin just said there, and I think there is a place for both. And I think this is something that hasn't really been mentioned yet, but I think there is a difference between reference documentation and like guidance documentation, right? Whereas I think the reference documentation is the button has these variants and these sizes. This is like reference information that an agent needs. The guidance is, how do I use these variants correctly in the scope of an entire page or an entire feature within my app or product? I think guidance is obviously, I think, a lot more prone to being positive on the prose side, where you can actually maybe give more substance, whereas the reference data is more, I think, better on the JSON or YAML size. We've mixed it a little bit where we're starting to create YAML for things like do's and don'ts and guidance that we then transform into Markdown, and then augment that with more human readable stuff. But yeah, I think it's a very good thought that Robin had there.
Nice. Afyia, do you have thoughts on this?
No, this is an interesting conversation. I think, from the point of view of a documentation specialist, I write prose, of course, I write guidance. I honestly wasn't quite sure what the difference was. And we worked through it. And I think I even reached out to Kevin to kind of understand, well, what would be different in the formatting of those two, human readable versus machine readable. Are folks prone to using one more than the other, or both? And I'm a mix of that, I guess.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this. Kevin and I were actually talking about this the other day in Slack. I was thinking about more like, if you imagine what we do with tokens now, where we've sort of said, okay, you can sort of see your design decisions in a design, but you can codify them as like, name value pairs as a token, right? So just a color is a name and a value. Well, I know people are working towards that in a much more complex scenario with like a component. That's a lot of Nathan's work. It's like, how do we articulate a component as structured content, structured data, right? And so if we can do that, then can we also just say that is really the source of truth? And from that, we can generate a Figma thing. From that, we can generate any code thing, any design component, actually, and documentation, and so is there like a source of truth here that is really the documentation, the specification of the thing? And from that, it being sort of focused on machine readable or like truly structured data, we could generate a prose version using like what AI is good at, sort of like mimicking human voice and tone and stuff, to kind of generate the human readable side. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'd love there to be like a single place where this stuff actually lives. And from it, we can get the various artifacts that we need,
Yeah.
Who knows? Other thoughts on this? There's another topic we can jump to up here, which might be a little controversial. All right. Quiet group today. So one of the things that we looked at in question 5, which was the open text question, what does the future of system docs look like for you and your org? I kind of went through and was able to split it in a couple different ways. So one of those ways was the type of change. Like 16% of responses were like talking about delivery changes. In other words, we're going to make our docs accessible via MCP, chat, skills, playgrounds, that kind of thing, instead of just like go to the doc site, 16% were consolidating, moving towards a single source of truth, kind of like what we were just talking about. 14% in authoring. So they were saying things like, our docs will be written by AI, and 10% disconnected from AI. So this problem space, they were saying, predates any AI stuff. Documentation is a thread that's been a problem for us for a long time, right? Or a challenge for us. The other split that I thought was really interesting was on how folks talked about the future of their docs as it relates to human readers, human consumers of the docs, and machine consumers of the docs. So I sketched it out over here where you can see that like only 5 folks in this answer referred to humans as the primary consumers of their documentation in the future. 14 said only machines will be the consumers of the docs in the future. And then we have this primarily machines, which was like they acknowledge humans will still need them, but that was 5 people. And then somewhere in the between primarily of these two was a balanced response. So I just thought this was fascinating to hear. It wasn't like the question didn't say, is this human or computer in the future that's reading these things? But I don't know if folks have thoughts on this. Like, how does this sit with you? Does this make you feel nervous about your future or hopeful? Doug?
So, okay. So my opinion on this is the same reason I read certain books on my Kindle and other books I buy physical. So I think the only machines is the Kindle, where you want to find the information quickly. You need a machine to find it and read it. But when I want to see what's available, if I'm looking at a recipe book or something, I want to flip through. I want to have something catch my eye and learn about that. And even in tech, in things, I do the same thing. I'll go to a website for Apollo or some technical thing, and I'll go page by page through the docs and looking at stuff to make myself aware of questions I didn't even know I should be asking or I should be prompting. So I still think there's going to be a human readable side of this stuff for a while. So there's that discovery of questions you didn't even know you should be asking, as opposed to, I don't think that precludes the AIs from being able to get the questions to what they already know to ask or what you know to prompt them. But I still think we're going to need this discovery process that is visible in the future.
Yeah, totally. Shaun, jump in.
No, that was great. That was great, Doug. The analogy was awesome. I work with two different clients on their design systems, and they could not be polar opposites in how they're working, and that has a real impact on the docs. I work with a government organization who is terrified of using AI and is nowhere, and so everything that we're producing is still it's done for humans. We're still drawing things in Figma and handwriting all of the code. Whereas on the other side, I work with an AI startup, and every line, 100% of their code is written by AI.
Yeah.
So we almost have no choice but that the machines are the primary consumers of the documentation. But even in that situation, there's still a step in the process where humans need to look at some docs. They need to look at what are the list of components that I've got available in order to guide the machines when they write their prompts. But the majority of the content over there, it's primarily focused on being consumed by machines. So yeah, just kind of really interesting conversation, especially on this point, just like knowing the contrast between those two folks that I work with.
Yeah, context is king there, right? That's almost like a cultural thing. It's like these two cultures of these orgs are so different. What's palatable in one is not in the other.
Yes.
How does that sit with you, Afyia? Is that aligned with your experience, or what was the culture like in your past experiences? Was it open to this, or?
Yeah, so my past experience, well, I'll just say, here's what I will say about this, about what I think. I think we're in a great place where we don't really need to necessarily pick a side, right? Human or AI. I think the goal is to be able to create a standard or create a source of truth that is structured well enough that it can feed or be delivered to any audience. So I'm not necessarily for human or for AI. My goal has always been to serve multiple audiences and to serve them what they need, where they need it.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
And I've always pushed that, and wherever I was, whether that was at, Epic Games or, consulting or doing freelance work with clients.
Yeah. Yeah. Stephen, jump in.
I think that's like a great thought. Like it's not really about where we think the documentation should be. It's where people are expecting it to be. And people are going to use the tool that they want. Like if people can go and read the documentation, that's what they're going to do. If they want to ask Claude or whatever, what are all the components available in the design system? They're going to expect that an answer comes back. Whether we like it or not, a lot of the time those AI tools will just hallucinate and just make something up if it doesn't know. And then they just think that that's the truth, right? I mean, that's what I've seen in our org is a lot of techno-functional folks, product owners, people that are not necessarily technical that are asking questions. They just assume whatever the AI tells them is the truth. So our job has become like, well, if they're going to use these tools, I want the information to be as correct as possible because they're going to use them no matter what. They expect to be able to ask these tools these questions in the same way that they can ask about their emails or documents in Confluence or Microsoft 365 or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
They expect the same thing. So, and you can see this in people posting on LinkedIn all the time, right? Documentation sites like Tailwind and other places. I mean, their visitors are cratering to the point where it's, they're losing millions and millions of visitors a month because people just don't go and look at that stuff anymore. So,
yeah. I think this aligns with, and maybe this is your response, Stephen, but this quote here from the question 5 responses that says, our docs are already being consumed less and less by people, and we've found that most of our users are just trusting their preferred AI tools. So our goal is that our documentation and guidance is just injected into people's workflows as the default experience without them ever really knowing. Was that you, Stephen?
I'm pretty sure that was probably me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So you restated that. I think that's interesting. Yeah.
And that's our org's goal is we don't want people to ever ask, like, build this with the design system. I want it to just, if they're prototyping or building anything, it should just use these things and know this stuff without anybody ever even having to know that it's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like, I agree with that. I also just acknowledge what the cost of that is, right? It's like removing the friction removes the requirement for somebody to go actually understand it themselves. And I think there's like, obviously we have to kind of move in that direction, but I also just, part of me is always like hesitant about like what that really what the real cost of that is, for us as humans. Like, what are we automating away from our own learning? Hattie, I see your comment about meet people where they are, and I've heard Afyia say that twice now about docs. So will one of you or both of you say what you mean by that? Because I think people mean different things by that.
Does Hattie want to jump in first?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I answer questions all day in Microsoft Teams that is asking about, how do I do this thing? Okay. If you're in Teams and asking me this, I need to make sure that some sort of documentation can be called or respond to you right away, because that's where you already are. So if there's someone that wants to just ask questions, great. Have we got an AI chatbot for you to read out those things? If it's someone that wants to go figure it out and like have the answer and take it to them with their product team or something like that, amazing. We have got a documentation site you can link to, right? So it's just having the breadth of things available to like however they're working, right? And I think that's a little bit of our, like, I would say anybody's challenge, because we've always had a problem with like people using components in Figma, and then there isn't really any place to like have documentation with it, like use it this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This to me is the future of documentation, or what I thought it was once we started experimenting with AI tools. I think way back when, and it's actually a phrase that you probably already know. It's called just-in-time docs or just-in-time documentation. It's the right docs in the right place where people need it for the right folks. And that has always been my goal whenever I was writing documentation. I had an understanding that people weren't reading it. They weren't going to some static reference site. They weren't contributing to it because it just wasn't where they were in the tools that they needed it. And I banged my head trying to figure out plugins of some sort that could kind of surface up component guidance, maybe in Figma or wherever the folks were. And, it just wasn't possible at the time. And I think now, we're in a place where we can do that, and we should. So one single source of truth that serves multiple audiences and can be served in multiple places, however they need it, in whatever format that is. Prose and the code and Storybook and Figma, just that's the ultimate goal. And that, if you were to ask me right now what the future is for documentation, that to me would be the ideal.
Yeah, love that. Okay, just a few minutes left. Doug, I see your check mark, my friend. What do you got for us?
Okay, so the only thing I was going to mention, that one very negative, and this isn't necessarily in our own design systems, but is using the AI to write the documentation, and which is fine when an AI is consuming the documentation, but I'm just seeing this increase. I'm seeing internally where people are just so productive and they're generating just gobs of things that they're expecting me to read through. And then I'm seeing it now on actual like text sites where I'm reading tooling information, and you just see the same thought repeated 3-4 times, reworded different ways, rephrasing itself. You're like, this is just the AI has written this, which again, when it's consuming it, doesn't matter. It dedupes it and it just gives you the thought. But that's, I don't know. It was tangential. That's why I put the check marks. But it's something that I think we have to fight with everything we can in our own systems to just fight the false productivity that AI gives you, and really put yourself in your user's shoes when you're reading the documentation. Is this sentence needed? Is this too wordy? Is it adding to something? I don't know. But it's something I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
For sure. Afyia, thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, of course, I wholeheartedly agree. We should not be using AI to write the docs. That's all I have to say. Just don't do it, please.
Oh my gosh, I love it that you stated it so clearly. And does anybody disagree with that? Like I feel that way because I think the most, in one sense, one of the most valuable things about the docs is the alignment it requires you to find in order to put it in writing. So it's like the process of writing it requires you to get everybody together, So if you just hand it to an AI to write, you're missing that. So who else thinks that is okay? All right, we got some people. Hattie, jump in.
Maybe this is just my experience, but as the person that's kind of worked in the shadows until I have now an AI enablement role, I had to use AI to help me get some of the stuff together because I don't know as much about I don't know heck of YAML languages or any of that type of stuff. So what I started off with is like, we have documentation in Figma, we have documentation in Storybook, GitHub, we have a content system. I just brought all the links together and I said, hey, let's start with this. And I'll get it reviewed by people, but to get me off of like a blank page and to have something to then be able to be reviewed, AI has really helped me not make those meetings working sessions and more, let me have something available. We can talk through this asynchronously, giving a direction before, you're kind of just sitting there staring at each other and you're like, how do we want to put this together?
Yeah.
Just jump in on that. I think there's nothing wrong with that. AI assisted is fine for folks, non-writing folks, moving from that dreaded blank page to some kind of maybe skeleton draft. That's fine. It's the complete AI generation that I push back on.
Yeah. Yes. Hattie, you feel good about that?
No, yeah, I agree. It was more just, I don't want AI taking all our jobs because it doesn't know any better than, what it can read everywhere else. And,
Lance, jump in.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Human writing is definitely the goal. I will say I have made a lot of naive mistakes in documentation, writing too much and doing things that are require too much human expertise, like making imagery and stuff like that. So we're trying to find ways to like leverage AI to move quicker. And a lot of that is like having less human content that we can manage. Yeah.
Kevin.
So definitely agree with you. I've had to deal with this and generated a lot of really crappy docs from AI, and had to read it as well. But one thing that it is good at is taking the schema that we already have that might be presented in one particular way and reformatting it, almost deterministically, but not quite. It is good at that and presenting it maybe on a different format, like into an HTML page or something like that, that you can visually see it. But as soon as it starts writing prose, it's cringe. And it's really hard to actually want to stomach through reading it, because you just know that there's no experience behind it. And that's the feeling that I get from it. But for just writing bullet points that come from data, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice. We've got just a minute left. Greg, what you got?
Yeah, just kind of adding to that, I think one of the things that I want to experiment with myself, I don't know if this will work, but it seems like it could, is, with AI, we have the ability to add the context to help determine like standards of, like, say it's translating from, deterministic or structured data, how it transforms that into prose. I think there's some things there that seem possible to help get it to be better. Not going to be as good as someone that's good at it, but better than maybe some of the cringe default stuff that we tend to experience. Getting it to make sure it's deduping its stuff and not repeating things.
Yeah.
All that kind of base level stuff that we experience when we're just having a chat and iterating on stuff with a chat agent. But yeah, like there's there's context everywhere. So, we can infuse context in different places. And that's, I think, the meta-ness of all of this, that as we kind of dig deeper and try different things, those are interesting places to play with this and see if we can get better outputs,
Totally.
But, it's got to come from the human has to define what is that structured information, what are those decisions that the AI doesn't know for us. So,
yeah. Thank you, Greg. Afyia, you're awesome. Thank you for bringing this conversation to us. It's one that's well past due for us as a community. So thanks for bringing it. Just calling out, if you haven't yet given some suggestions to the name for Annette's RV, I'll leave this Fig Jam open for a little while so you can get those in. She's a beauty. Lots of fun stuff happening in the space. Again, get connected to Afyia and I out on LinkedIn. Of course, listen to some more Annie Lennox this week. Redwoods is open. Come check it out there if you like this kind of conversation. We're always having this stuff. All the deep dive and recaps are released for the last episode, 78 with Casey. A couple articles here. Kalig just released this incredible State of AI design systems tool. Please go check this out. Really cool stuff. And just lots happening in the space. As always, some really good stuff happening in the community here too. So check all of it out. It's great to see you all. Afyia, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you all in a week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Question. Remember, you can get access to the raw data, the collaborative Fig Jam, and all of the recordings for this episode and so many more on my website, bencallahan.com. If you or your team could use an outside perspective in your design system efforts, I'd be honored to support you in that way. There's more information about my coaching and consulting offerings over on the site. And if you need a hand building a sustainable design system program, my studio Sparkbox is standing by, ready to partner. Hiring Sparkbox is an investment in your design system and your team. Reach out and let's see if there's a good fit. Thank you so much for being here, and remember, stay in learning mode.